Greetings, magical mavens, and welcome to the Writing Witch podcast. In today's video, I'm thrilled to share with you 10 of my favorite tips for practicing green witchcraft in your own way. Whether you're a beginner just starting out on your spiritual journey or a seasoned witch looking to deepen your practice, these tips are designed to help you connect with nature, harness your intuition, and tap into your own innate power. Based on my own experiences and research, I hope these tips will inspire and empower you to walk your own path in becoming a more and more powerful and confident nature witch. First things first, I'd like to start by debunking a few myths about what green witchcraft actually is. One of the most common misconceptions about green witches is that they all have to live out in the country somewhere that's green, or in a little quaint cottage in the woods, or at least have a garden of their own, maybe in the suburbs. While this has become a stereotype in pop culture, and even here on social media and YouTube, this is not at all the case. A green witch can be anybody who creates habits, rituals, and a lifestyle out of connecting with the magic of nature. It's not about where you live or how much land you have or how many plants you have, but rather it's about your connection to the natural world and your willingness to incorporate that connection into your daily life. Whether you live in a bustling city or a rural area or anywhere in between, you can still practice green witchcraft by taking walks in nature, growing herbs on your windowsill, or even just incorporating natural elements into your home decor. The key is to find ways to connect with the earth and honor its cycles and rhythms in your own unique way. The next misconception I want to address is the idea that a green witch has to have a working knowledge of the magical and medicinal qualities of tons and tons of herbs and plants. While this is definitely the goal for many who would consider themselves green witches, it just isn't a hard and fast rule for all. On the one hand, a green witch can be someone who just forms a personal relationship with only the plants and or herbs of their choosing. This could be plants that are native or naturalized in your own backyard or your public park. It can include any types of plants that you and your friends or family happen to enjoy growing in your gardens or on your windowsills, whether they have traditional magical or medicinal meanings or not. It could be your favorite houseplants or cut flowers that you can get from the florist. It doesn't even have to always be live plants or fresh plants. A green witch can be primarily connected to the plant world through their relationship with dried culinary herbs or magical and medicinal herbs that maybe you purchase pre-dried online or at your local tea shop, or perhaps an essential oil or hydrosol form. A green witch doesn't have to know all of the Latin names for plants, along with their common folk names or traditional meanings or uses. Obviously, health and safety are a concern, so I always recommend doing your own research before consuming any plants or applying them to your body. But when it comes to the magical meanings and practices, there are really no rules that you're required to follow. We all get to discover what each plant means to us personally based on our own unique experiences. A green witch doesn't have to even ever read a single green witchcraft book or even have watched a video or podcast like this one. Think back to your childhood. Were you one of those kids who would pick flowers to brighten yours or someone else's day? Did you ever arrange them into patterns on the ground or make flower chains to wear or decorate your room with fallen leaves? Perhaps like me, you even went around intuitively looking for plants that felt aligned with some intention you might have had and put them all into a soda bottle together to make a pretend potion. Even if that intention was just to have fun or to celebrate the season. Or did you even just look at or photograph plants and mushrooms and animals and feel excited by that? That was your own natural version of green witchcraft, and you still get to do that today. And here's a controversial opinion of my own. A green witch does not even need to quote-unquote work with any particular plants in order to connect with their magic. They can just spend time near plants to get centered, grounded, and connected to nature. The truth is, there is no one-size-fits-all approach to green witchcraft. Each witch has their own unique path and relationship with nature. Some may choose to focus on herbs and plants, while others may more so connect with the elements or animals. The key is to find what resonates with you and to cultivate a deep connection with the natural world. This can be done in a variety of different ways, from taking walks in the park, to meditating in nature, to simply making eco-friendly lifestyle choices and incorporating natural elements into your daily life. The important thing is to honor the cycles and rhythms of the earth and to find ways to live in harmony with nature. And this doesn't ever need to be done perfectly. So whether you're a seasoned green witch or just starting out on your journey, remember that there is no right or wrong way to practice. Follow your intuition, connect with the earth, and let your magical journey unfold organically. And there's one more misconception that I would like to address. The idea that in order to identify as a green witch, you have to not also strongly identify with any of the other quote-unquote types of witches, or at least that the majority of your craft, path, and practice have to fall under the category of green witchcraft in order to deserve the title. While some folks are green witches through and through, I think the majority of us are actually somewhat eclectic. As human beings and as witches, we are multifaceted, multi-passionate creatures. For example, I've identified for many years as a sort of an air witch because my natal sun and rising signs are in air signs, and I found my witchy path through art, creative writing, journaling, learning, teaching, storytelling, mindset work, and crafting grimoires and books of shadows, all things that are traditionally ruled over by the air element's esoteric correspondences. The witchy and new age spiritual communities can sometimes oversimplify things, and it can lead us to believe that we all have to fit into categories. For example, when I was very active in the manifestation coaching industry, there was always this idea that some people are more masculine and others are more feminine, which was kind of just another way of saying that a masculine manifester is more fire and air vibes, while a feminine manifester is more water and earth vibes. And since many in that community were operating on ideas like the Big Three concept in astrology, which basically just looks at mainly your sun sign or perhaps also your moon sign and your rising sign, and believing that those things make up the majority of who you are as a person, I began to believe that I was overly masculine and had a feminine energy deficiency. There was even a point where I believed that I must be inherently imbalanced because I was struggling at that time in areas where the earth element was a factor. But what I had to remember and come home to was the fact that none of my quote-unquote air witch magic would have even been possible really without my path also being inherently intermingled with earth magic. Long before I knew to call myself a manifestation enthusiast, a witch, a pagan, or even just a nature-based spiritual seeker, I was that kid who loved to be outside in nature, observing plants and animals and elements, and using them as inspiration for my creativity. In order to feel healthy, sane, and empowered, I've always had to make sure I was connecting with the natural world, getting fresh air, and celebrating the changes in the seasons. While the majority of my practice may seem to be based around mindset work, art, and storytelling, nature is the source of my inspiration and my magic, even if it isn't always in the most obvious or traditional ways. And the times in my life that have been like dark nights of the soul, or some of the most difficult times in my life when I had a hard time seeing the magic in the world, were times when I allowed myself to become disconnected from nature and to get too much in my head and into these more nebulous concepts like manifestation. And here's where it gets even more interesting. Once I started learning more about astrology, I discovered something that made me say, oh, well, that explains a lot. So most of us know our sun sign and maybe, like I said, our moon sign and our rising signs. But actually all 12 zodiac signs show up somewhere in each of our birth charts. And while it's still true that you may seem to have more of a heavy concentration in certain elements or certain signs than others, it still takes all 4 elements to make up any person's life or any person's chart. I used to think I had very little earth element in my chart by working with that Big Three concept, which I will say, learning your Big Three is a much better dip of your toe into the water of astrology than just working with your sun sign. It definitely adds a lot of nuance, and it's the only reason why I ever even became convinced that astrology was real, honestly. But at the end of the day, it is kind of a lazy system in the sense that it totally disregards a big chunk of who you actually are. As it turns out, when I learned the rest of my chart, I discovered that I have a ton of earth element in my chart. I actually have this thing called a stellium, which is where a ton of your planets are clustered together into one particular sign. And wouldn't you know that my Mercury, my Saturn, my Uranus, and my Neptune are all in Capricorn, an earth element sign. I also have Jupiter and Mars in Taurus, another earth sign, and my South Node, which is a placement in astrology that refers to what comes most naturally to us and feels most comfortable, is in the earth sign of Virgo. Not to mention that each of our signs are also in houses ruled over by signs. So my North Node, the placement representing my soul's destiny, is in the 10th house, which is ruled by Capricorn. And my Pluto is in the 6th house, which means that is ruled by Virgo, which might explain why I really relate to the archetype of the goddess Persephone, a goddess of both nature and shadow work. This might sound like gibberish if you don't know astrology, but the bottom line is that we all have all 4 elements in our life, and just because you've been conditioned to believe that you're more aligned with certain ones as opposed to others, doesn't mean that you don't get to embody all of them in your own way. Astrology shows us that the way we connect with a certain element might be different than the way others connect with it, but it's still part of our life, our path, and potentially our practice as witches if we so choose. In many cases, those super green witchy witches have strong earth placements in their natal chart, and often those will include some of the ones we call the personality planets, such as their sun sign, their moon sign, and their rising sign. There's also something in astrology called the chart ruler, which is the planet or luminary that rules over your rising sign. So for example, mine is Mercury, which is associated with air, but in my chart, Mercury itself as a planet is actually placed in that Capricorn stellium. So even my chart ruler turns out to be linked to the earth element, which makes a lot of sense with everything that I've shared so far in this video about my path and practice. It's kind of like, in order for me to feel truly empowered in my Mercury air-like personality, I need to also be grounded in the earth element too. That's been a constant theme in my life and a balance that I'm continuing to learn to achieve. So non-traditional green witch tip number 4 is to explore how your astrology, or at least your personal relationship with the elements, plays a role in your connection with nature. Understanding what signs, planets, and houses you have paired together in your chart can help you better understand and embrace how these elements play together best for you and your unique green witch path. Now, on the same note as my soapbox above about rejecting stereotypes, I do think it's important to note here that you by no means have to know or care about astrology or any specific modality in order to be a powerful witch or to be grounded as a nature-based spirit. But if it's something that you're curious about, I also want to let you know that while astrology can seem quite complex, it doesn't have to feel complicated. Just like anything in our witchy practice, we have the ability to approach astrology from the angle of balancing the elements in order to get grounded in our understanding of it. I passively studied astrology for years before I really felt grounded enough in it to talk about it as confidently as I am with you right now. It used to feel like astrology was this nebulous, in-your-head kind of modality, more so than one that made me feel grounded. I used to feel like when I was paying attention to astrology, I was being more of an air witch than an earth witch, but it turns out it doesn't have to be that way. What really changed the game for me was learning to look at astrology from a little bit more of an earth-based perspective, and that's where my friend Tanae Stewart came in. She's an amazing astrologer who happens to also be an earth sign. She's a Taurus, which is normally kind of stereotyped as a sign for people who are too realistic to care about nebulous things like astrology. Or maybe that's just my own stereotype of my ex-boyfriend. I don't know, you'll have to let me know. But in any case, Tanae is living proof that we are all unique in our arrangement of elements and how we can harness them as our superpowers. She identifies as both an astrologer, an airy witch, and a cottage witch, an earthy witch. And she teaches astrology both through the lens of self-care and through the perspective of the Witch's Wheel of the Year, a practice that shows the inherent connection between the earth and the cosmos. Quiet as it's kept, if you know the 8 Sabbats of the Witches, which if you're watching this channel, you probably have a pretty good understanding, or if you don't, watch the rest of my videos. And or if you have a good understanding of the cycles of the moon, you also kind of already have the foundations to know astrology. They're actually all one and the same thing. Today teaches how the solstices and equinoxes are actually the moments when the sun changes from one zodiac sign to the next, and the cross-quarter Sabbats, like Halloween and Beltane, are actually the high points of the fixed zodiac signs, which represent the energies of the 4 main seasons of the year. She also teaches how the new and full moons that occur during any Sabbat season are aligned with the current sun sign and its opposite to help us create balance in our lives every month. To bring in even more of the green witchy vibes, she's also an herbal witch, and she shares the actual reasons why we tend to see correspondence sheets showing that certain plants are supposedly ruled by certain elements or certain planets. And most importantly, she weaves all of this together into simple seasonal practices that help us to actually experience more grounding, more joy, and more fulfillment in our everyday lives. So if this sounds like exactly what you need in your life to get grounded or to balance your elements, or to start learning astrology, then Tanae and I would love to invite you to join our upcoming Empowered Modern Witches Summit. It's an annual virtual gathering of witches and magical folk happening on the week of the autumn equinox. We and several other magical mavens will be presenting on how to align your self-care practices with your witchy practices each season to maximize your power and fulfillment in life. I'll be presenting on how to align your desires for the year ahead using the powerful energies of the autumn season. And it's totally free to attend. It's coming up really soon on September 18th. So whether you can attend live or not, you'll be able to catch the workshops and our rituals on the replay. So I invite you to sign up today at the link that'll be on the screen now, and it'll also be linked down below. So on that note, tip number 5 is to embrace cyclical living and take a look at your relationship with the cycles of nature. This can include seasons, moon phases, even menstrual cycles and emotional cycles if you're in tune with those things. Unless you're brand new to the channel, which by the way, if you are, welcome, love to have you here, you know how much I love embracing the magic of seasonal living. I actually consider this to be one of my personal ways of living as a green witch. One of the simplest and most fulfilling ways to embrace the magic of nature is to recognize ourselves as part of nature. Just like any other animal or plant on Earth, we as humans have physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual responses to the changes of the seasons, in the cosmos and in our bodies. By simply observing and recognizing this in our own ways, we have the ability to see ourselves as part of the great circle of life, or what I like to call the plant, tend, harvest, compost cycle. This is the pattern that everything in the universe cycles through over and over again. And as humans, we can embrace this cycle in our own lives in both literal and magical ways. Obviously, a green witch can get really in tune with how the energy of the universe works simply by physically gardening. But if you're also into spellcasting or manifestation, you can work with the cycle of the seasons and or moon phases to plant the seeds of your intentions, tend to your goals, harvest the rewards, and compost or recycle back into the universe anything that you may have picked up along the way that no longer serves you. Rather than making this an insanely long video, I'm going to keep this section fairly brief since I have so many other videos going deeper on this subject. But to learn the basics of cyclical living for healing and manifestation, I invite you to stay tuned to the end of this video and tap on the video that pops up as my end screen. Tip number 6 is to simply observe how you're already connecting with the earth. Notice that this tip is not to go out and do anything different. Whether you're already a seasoned witch or if you're just witchy curious, I guarantee that you are already connected with green witchery in some way, shape, or form. Whether you're into cooking with herbs and spices, going for a weekly walk outside, or just sitting outside on your lunch break observing the birds and squirrels and potted plants in the parking lot of your job, you're already in the habit of connecting with Mother Earth and her energy. By taking the time to acknowledge and appreciate these connections, you can deepen your relationship with nature and tap into its magical power. So take a moment to reflect on how you're already connecting with the earth and let that awareness guide you on your journey towards becoming a more powerful and confident green witch. This is one of the biggest messages that we'll be sharing at the Empowered Modern Witches Summit. Being a witch isn't always about adding anything new to your routine or having to practice in any prescribed way in order to be a valid magical practitioner. Part of being a natural witch is recognizing the magic and power that are already inherent in you and in your natural way of being. By acknowledging and honoring the ways that you're already a green witch, you can build upon your practice in a way that will likely stick and continue to serve you as a healthy foundation going forward for anything that you decide to learn or practice in the future. Tip number 7 is to build on whatever you're already doing. So for example, back in 2019, I was really craving a lot more of a natural lifestyle. I had formed a bit of a habit of working at my desk all week and then going out on the town with my friends on the weekends. I no longer lived in an area that had a lot of nature just inherently in the environment like I had before, and so it took me a while to realize what was missing in my life. One weekend when my friends were out of town, I went for a nature walk in the park by myself, and then I came home and I just sat on my then totally bare balcony. I realized that I wanted to bring that feeling of connecting with nature home with me instead of only getting to experience it when I was able to get out to the parks. I remembered suddenly that I had been living in this apartment for several months, and I had yet to take advantage of the 10 by 10 foot patio that I had insisted on getting when I had been shopping for a new home. I had intended to get back into gardening, but had totally gotten distracted by other aspects of my life. By this point, I was already at the end of summer, and I knew it wasn't practical to start a whole garden from scratch at that point, so instead, I chose to just get some potted herbs from the grocery store and to make a daily ritual out of sitting outside on my patio as often as possible, and to prioritize planting a garden for the following year. That late summer and early fall, I started reading and journaling more consistently again, and I made sure to do those things outdoors whenever I could. Even in a crowded apartment building facing 4 lanes of traffic, I began to feel more connected with nature again. I developed a relationship with the trees in front of my house and began to notice how they changed color at different times. I found joy in observing the neighborhood squirrels and birds, and even began noticing new species of birds that I had never seen before and hadn't expected to see in such a busy area. I did some research, and as it turns out, these birds were traveling on their massive migration path and happened to be passing through my area just in time for me to catch a glimpse of them and have kind of a little magical moment with one of them. This inspired me to start feeding birds when I could. I even discovered that just before sunset every night, a couple of bunnies would hop around on the grass out front, sometimes engaging in full-on boxing matches. By researching the magical as well as the mundane properties of the animals I was seeing, I learned more about my place in the environment and in the circle of life, and this made me feel more connected spiritually. I began journaling on my observations of nature and how they made me feel, and found myself getting really into animal spirit messages and seeing symbols in the clouds. I even started incorporating that inspiration into my art and my work, and actually this simple practice of just sitting outside and observing and sometimes doing my reading and journaling outdoors instead of indoors inspired me to dive back into my seasonal living practice, which I had kind of fallen off from during my manifestation obsession in my practice. I realized that in order to manifest the type of material wealth that I was truly aligned with, I needed to get back in tune with what my authentic connection with the earth element actually looked and felt like to me, not just what the designer purse obsessed manifestation coaches were prescribing at the time. It reminded me that my path in life was not to move to an even busier city to record podcast interviews in person with seemingly important people in the manifestation community like I'd been influenced to believe it was. I realized there was actually nothing I wanted more than to just be as close to the peace, simplicity, and quietude of nature as I possibly could. I stopped trying so hard to succeed at the life I had learned to believe I was supposed to have, and instead started appreciating and building upon the earth-based practices and career projects that had inspired me to start my spiritual path and my spiritual business in the first place. I started sharing about my seasonal living practice here on YouTube and my podcast again, and it eventually led to the green witchy practices and content that I'm so deeply immersed in sharing now. Just like a seed planted in the earth, your green witch lifestyle gets to be planted, tended, and harvested more and more over time. Just start where you are, observing and engaging more with whatever way of connecting with the earth feels most inspiring, and see how your practice grows over time and over seasons. Tip number 8 is to document your green witch journey in some way. If you're looking to deepen your connection with nature and your green witch practices, one of the best things you can do is start documenting your experiences. This can take many forms depending on what feels fun and natural for you. For example, you could start a Green Witch grimoire where you record your observations of nature or your nature-based spells and rituals. Or you could keep a journal or book of shadows where you write down your thoughts, feelings, and experiences related to nature. Or even just ideas that you have while you're immersed in nature, which again could mean just sitting outside on a busy street where there happen to be birds and squirrels. There's something about being outside in the open air and being in the vicinity of plants and animals that creates a different type of inspiration and intuition. Tap into that regardless of whether it looks like a traditional Green Witch practice for you. Another option is to make voice notes on your phone as you're walking through nature so you can capture your thoughts and observations in the moment. You could even download a plant or animal identification app and keep a log of the life forms you encounter in your environment. Whatever method you choose, the important thing is to document your experiences and observations so you can look back on them later and see what felt magical to you as you developed along your Green Witch path. This can be especially helpful and fulfilling if you're into things like animal spirit messages or signs or synchronicities. When you've been on the magical path for a while, it can be easy to start taking the magical moments for granted or straight up forgetting about them. In my humble opinion, the most magical and meaningful grimoires and books of shadows are really just journals where you express visual or verbal representations of your most meaningful experiences as a magical practitioner. And when you look back on it, you'll be able to see how beautifully your path unfolded and what you learned along the way. Whether to share this wisdom with others or just to keep it to yourself, it's equally valuable. And if, like me, you do happen to have a desire to develop an herbal practice, it's so helpful to develop a relationship with plants by documenting your experiences with them, or what you're learning about them. Now, full disclosure, I, the writing witch who runs a whole shop just for magical journaling supplies and runs an online program to help you build your magical book of shadows, I don't have an epic journal dedicated to every plant I encounter. I do intend to in the near future, but because of some hectic circumstances that I've experienced in my life in the past couple of years, this just hasn't been a top priority, and that's okay. But what's most important is that I haven't let those challenges hold me back from delving into the magic of plants when I felt called to it, or from keeping a log of some kind of my learnings and experiences. Being a Green Witch, or any type of witch for that matter, is never about perfectionism or going hard or going home. For me, it's always about embracing the magic of nature in whatever ways you have access to, no matter how imperfect it may seem at the time. For the past few years, I've really prioritized relearning how to garden, even in the far from ideal microclimate of my fully covered east-facing balcony, which gets no overhead or south-facing light. Rather than feeling like I had to learn about every type of plant all at once or to grow everything myself right away, while I was also rising to the challenge of this weird gardening experience, I instead focused on the plants that I could really immediately benefit from, and the plants that seemed to do well in the environment I was working with. I kind of made it my mission to prove to myself and others that it is possible to have an enchanting garden, even if you don't own any land at all. And some of you have actually let me know that these imperfect gardening videos that I've been posting have inspired you to get connected with nature even though you live in a city or in an apartment. And that makes me so happy. I have a dream that one day, anyone, regardless of where they live or what they have access to, can have a green haven of some kind, and the cities will eventually evolve into a bustling green landscape of humans living in harmony with nature. A tall order, I know, but hey, a witch can dream, right? The next tip is to prioritize getting out into nature. Now that I've proven to myself that I can garden in my imperfect situation, I know I'll be an even better and more experienced gardener once I do have access to land. And now that I have my footing in that area and have the fulfillment to be able to look out my window and see a green haven that I've created for myself with the help of the elements, now I'm beginning to feel more able to branch out even more in my Green Witch practice. Since I still feel the desire to immerse myself even more deeply in nature, I've been prioritizing taking trips out to the parks and forests as often as possible. And I've been dipping my toes in the water of foraging and plant identification. I'm watching YouTube videos about the medicinal, magical, and nutritional benefits of wild plants while I fulfill my shop orders, load the dishwasher, and till my compost bucket. I'm collecting books about herbalism and reading at least a few pages every night before falling asleep. I'm using my phone app to identify any interesting plants I happen upon in my weekly park trips, and I'm even learning the history and properties of weeds that grow out of cracks in the sidewalk. While I don't currently feel like I have time to make herbalism my full-time job or even my full-time hobby, I'm feeling more and more connected to it by allowing it to be a part-time hobby for right now, knowing that what we focus on grows. If I'm focused on green witch magic just a little bit here and there every day, I know that that will grow and grow until one day I am in a magical green haven of my dreams. And that's part of what magic is. It's about leaning into what we desire in whatever ways we can and trusting the universe to allow that seed to grow. So far, I've harvested some edible, medicinal, and magical plants from the wild to use in my practice, as well as just bought some from the grocery store in fresh, potted, or dried form. Yes, kitchen herbs are equally magical. Some plants I've successfully propagated to get growing in my own garden, while others I've dried or tinctured to use in my healthcare and/or my magical practices going forward. And this leads to the next tip, which is feel free to accumulate armchair knowledge. I don't know if you've heard this phrase before, but in the witchy community there's this term, armchair magician, which basically means that you read a lot or consume a lot of educational resources, but you don't actually get your hands dirty and practice what you've learned. Now, on the one hand, it is a valid point that you don't just want to be a knowledge dragon, hoarding books or information without ever really immersing yourself in the actual practice of what you preach. The point of gaining magical knowledge is to transmute it into wisdom from personal experience. But at the same time, there is never a need to force yourself to take action on every single thing that you've learned just for the sake of it. This kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier about prioritizing working with plants that could actually benefit me in my real life at the time. When I started my gardening practice, for example, my main objective was to feel connected with nature by immersing myself in that plant, tend, harvest, compost cycle of agriculture so that I could better understand how as a human I'm a part of that cycle, both literally and spiritually, and to incorporate more seasonal eating into my diet. So initially, my priority was to see which food crops I could grow and eat and learn from in very practical ways. Even though I do have a desire to eventually grow more decorative flowers and more obscure magical herbs, I'm aware that my space and sunlight are limited at the moment, so I'm mainly focused on prioritizing things I know I'll use and appreciate in real life, like basil, beets, and tomatoes. I began dipping my toes in the waters of garden witchcraft, first from the perspective of my seasonal witch practice and my kitchen witch practice. I wanted to live more seasonally by eating and cooking more seasonally, and gardening was the natural next step in that direction for me. But now that I've been planting and harvesting some basic food crops for a few years in a row, and for the most part have my garden plan figured out for the moment, I've spent more and more time this summer learning about plants that I can either observe or forage in the more natural areas in my city and its surrounding towns. Now, notice I said either observe or forage. While I do get really excited when I find something edible that I actually want to try eating or propagating, like nettle, self-heal, and goldenrod, and specifically when I find those things in an area that I feel would be safe to harvest and consume from, because the side of the road, very polluted area, don't want to harvest from there. But there are also just as many plants that I've identified but not picked for that reason or for other reasons. Or in some cases, I've picked some things in small quantities just to enjoy as a cut flower in water and then to compost, but don't really feel the need to tincture or preserve it or harvest a ton of it. Here on the internet, there are content creators who are really deeply immersed in the whole herbal lifestyle, and it can be so inspiring to see how they grow and or forage massive amounts of all these different plants, and have huge apothecaries filled with jars and jars and jars of dried herbs and tinctures for days. It's easy to see that and feel like we have to grow and or harvest as much as we possibly can to emulate that overstocked apothecary aesthetic. But this is, well, yet another misconception. In my humble opinion, a truly connected green witch knows that we really only need to expend our energy and the energy of Mother Earth in sustainable and helpful ways. I totally respect and appreciate that some people have large families, specific health concerns, and or a career path that requires them to strive for accumulating a ton of plant knowledge and plant matter. but planting and harvesting in excess is really not necessary at all for most of us, especially when we're just getting started out. For example, I learned about the nutritional properties of nettle and wild onion in the past couple of years, so when spring arrived, I was so excited to find those things growing in the wild. But rather than harvesting every little bit I could find right away, I instead tried them first in small doses to see how or if I even liked them, and if I could get them to regrow in my own garden. I did successfully get wild onions to grow back again and again in a pot on my porch, which is so much fun. I didn't have as much luck regrowing nettle, but that's okay with me. I harvested enough in the spring to make a nice nettle-based dinner, and I considered it a special treat for that time of year as part of my seasonal eating practice. It isn't necessarily something that I need to hoard, it can instead be something that I look forward to now that I know where and when to look for it. Self-heal is a plant that I learned has medicinal properties for a specific health concern that I have. And while it's not something I have to treat with herbs, I thought it would be fun and magical to try adding self-heal into my diet just out of curiosity. But again, rather than harvesting and hoarding every little flower I could find, I just collected enough to make one tincture, and I'll take a drop of it each day for the next 6 months or so to see if I find it helpful. If not, or if it totally gets the job done, I don't necessarily need to even pick it again, but if I do decide I want more, I can simply look forward to picking more next summer when it returns to abundance. And maybe harvesting a little bit extra next time if I do decide that I'm going to be using it more consistently. It's about learning as you go instead of jumping the gun right away. And then there are things like horsetail, which I totally did not enjoy eating and didn't really feel like I needed for medicinal reasons, so I'm glad I only picked a small amount and left the rest to nature or for the next forager. There are plenty of things that I'll identify and learn about just out of curiosity, but don't necessarily need to take home myself. Some plants that I learn about and locate in nature will serve as helpful information in the future if I ever need them, while others will only ever be armchair knowledge, and that is totally fine. Sometimes being a green witch is just about the joy and curiosity of learning. And some plants, whether they're edible, medicinal, or not, we're just meant to connect with by identifying them, greeting them, saying hello to them, seeing if they have any metaphorical wisdom for us without ever even necessarily picking or touching them or working with them in any physical way. Sometimes it's just about the presence. And this is true of things that maybe you don't see in your physical environment, but that you're learning about online. I consider plants to be yet another thing that can be spirit messages. So for example, if you just keep hearing the word nettle for some reason and it doesn't grow in your environment, but you start paying attention and you notice that it's sort of coming up as a sign for you, you can research the plant either from a magical or from any other perspective just to see if there's anything in there that speaks to your intuition as a sign or a symbol. In some cases, that's all you really need. Now, there are so many more things I could say about being your own kind of green witch, so if you'd like me to make a follow-up video answering specific questions, I invite you to post a comment below. Has this video inspired you to get back into your green witch practice or to try something new? If so, I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below as well. And I'd be so grateful if while you're down there, you could like this video, subscribe, and hit the bell button so that the YouTube gods know that this was worth watching. And don't forget to sign up for the Empowered Modern Witches Summit, which is coming up soon. I hope to see you there, and in the meantime, thank you so much for being your magical self in the world. Until next time, blessed be.